All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful and honestly most misunderstood ideas in all of economics. It's an idea from 200 years ago that explains so much about our world today. Everything from how your phone got made to this kind of crazy concept that free trade can make everyone better off, even when it seems like it shouldn't. We're talking about David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage.
So, to really wrap our heads around this, we're not going to start way back in the 1800s. Nope. We're going to start with a simple puzzle, something you might run into today. And it's one that seems to have a super obvious answer.
Okay, imagine this. You and your roommate are throwing a party. And let's be honest, you're just better at everything. You're faster at cooking, you're faster at cleaning, you've got the clear edge. So, common sense says to get things done as fast as possible, you should just do it all yourself, right? Seems obvious.
Well, that idea, being faster or better at something, has a name. Economists call it absolute advantage. And for a long, long time, that's how everyone thought about it. The person or the country with the absolute advantage, they're the ones who should do the work. End of story. But that's exactly where the story gets interesting. Okay, so now let's hit rewind. We're going back about 200 years, because this exact same puzzle, just on a global scale, was really bugging an English economist. And what he came up with was going to challenge, well, pretty much everything people thought they knew about trade.
This is the guy, David Ricardo, and in 1817, he basically said, nope, you're all wrong. He argued that even if one country is better at producing literally everything, it still makes sense for them to trade. The answer to our party planning problem is a big no. And the reason why, well, that's kind of the secret sauce of our entire modern global economy. And you gotta understand, Ricardo wasn't just sitting in an ivory tower thinking this stuff up. This was a real-world fight. At the time, this idea of mercantilism was dominant, the idea that trade is a zero-sum game, where one country wins and the other loses. And when Britain passed these protectionist corn laws that made food crazy expensive, Ricardo used his new theory as a weapon. He was trying to prove that free trade wasn't a fight, it was a way to make the whole nation better off.
So, how on earth did he prove this? How could the person who's better at everything not be the one to do everything? Simple. He completely changed the question. He realized it's not about asking who's the best. The real question is, what are you giving up to do it? And that, right there, is the million-dollar concept, opportunity cost. Think about it. Every single choice you make means you're not doing something else. So the cost of you cooking for the party isn't just the time and the ingredients. It's the cleaning you didn't do in that time. Ricardo's genius was realizing that this hidden cost, this next best thing you gave up, is what truly matters. Okay, let's look at Ricardo's classic example. He used England and Portugal making cloth and wine. Now look at the numbers. Portugal is just flat out better at both. It takes them fewer hours to make a unit of cloth and fewer hours to make a unit of wine. They have the absolute advantage in everything. So case closed, right? Portugal should just do it all. Well, let's actually look at the opportunity costs and see what's really going on. And this is where the magic happens. Look at the real cost, what each country gives up. For England to make 1 unit of cloth, it costs them about 0.83 units of wine. But for Portugal, the country that's better at making cloth, to make that same unit, they have to give up more than a full unit of wine. All of a sudden, England, the worst producer, is actually the lower-cost producer of cloth when you measure it this way. That is the giant aha moment. It's not about who's best overall, it's about who gives up the least. England has the comparative advantage in cloth, and if you run the numbers the other way, Portugal has the comparative advantage in wine. So, the logical thing to do, England makes all the cloth, Portugal makes all the wine, and then they trade. And by doing that, both countries end up with more of both goods than if they tried to do it all themselves. Everybody wins. And Ricardo himself put it pretty elegantly back in 1817. He said that with free trade, each country just naturally puts its resources toward what's most beneficial to each. He saw it as a system that organically creates more wealth for everyone involved. Now, this wasn't just some dusty old idea that stayed in a book. This concept literally became the blueprint for our entire modern global economy. It completely flipped the script on how people thought about trade. Before Ricardo, under mercantilism, the goal was to get the biggest slice of a fixed pie. Hoard gold, export more than you import. Ricardo showed that trade isn't about slicing up a pie, it's about making the whole pie bigger for everyone. The goal shifted from hoarding wealth to increasing what everybody could actually have and use.
And does this actually play out in the real world? Well, take a look at modern trade deals like NAFTA, which were totally built on these principles. You let countries specialize, and trade can absolutely explode. The US alone saw its agricultural exports to Mexico and Canada skyrocket, eventually hitting over $300 billion a year.
In fact, the entire system that governs global trade today, the World Trade Organization, is basically designed to let comparative advantage do its thing. The whole point of its rules is to create a level playing field. No special treatment, no political favors, so that countries can specialize in what they do best or what they're least bad at.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Ricardo came up with this in 1817. His model was super simple, super elegant, but the real world, it's messy, it's complicated. So the big question is, how does this 200-year-old idea really hold up today? Well, the biggest knock against the theory is that its assumptions are just not realistic. It pretends there are no shipping costs, it assumes labor is the only thing that matters, and maybe most importantly, it assumes that a worker who loses their job in one industry can just snap their fingers and get a new job in a different one. And we all know life just doesn't work that way.
And here's another huge update to the theory. Ricardo's model is what we'd call static. It's like a snapshot in time. It assumes Portugal is good at wine, and that's that. But the modern view is all about dynamic advantage. The idea is that countries aren't stuck with the advantages they have now. Just look at a country like South Korea. They didn't just happen to have a comparative advantage in making high-tech electronics. They strategically built it through massive investments in education and technology. You can actually create an advantage. And this really gets to the heart of the most important critique. The theory is great at promising gains for the country as a whole, but it's totally silent about the fact that there are real winners and real losers. For a factory worker whose job just got shipped overseas, hearing about aggregate gains for the economy is pretty cold comfort. And that's the core issue. The benefits of free trade are often spread out thinly across millions of consumers, but the costs, the job losses, the shuttered towns, are brutally concentrated and can be devastating. So it's pretty clear that today, comparative advantage isn't just about how many hours it takes to do something. It's way more complex. Now it comes from things like technology, intellectual property, having a highly skilled workforce, and building incredibly efficient global supply chains. These are the things that really decide who makes what in the 21st century.
But this is also why Ricardo's core idea is more relevant than ever. Just think about the smartphone in your pocket. It's not made in one country. The comparative advantage is broken down into tiny pieces. Maybe the US has the advantage in design and software, Japan has it in making the camera sensors, and China has it in final assembly. Ricardo's principle now applies not just to finished goods, but to every single step in a product's journey around the world.
So yeah, the world has changed a lot since 1817, but Ricardo's fundamental insight is still absolutely essential. It teaches us to look past the obvious, to look past who seems best, and to always ask that crucial question, what's the opportunity cost? Which really leaves us with one final huge question to think about. In a world that's being reshaped by AI, automation, and global remote work, what will the comparative advantage of the future even be? And who's going to have it?